episode of A Drink from Upstream. And today we're going to take a drink, if you will, from Psalm 138. And the first 4 verses is what I want to look at today. And the very last line of these verses goes like this: "My strength of soul you increased." So the psalmist is writing a testimony as to the present work of God in his life. And he's going to tell us how or why that came about. But I want to get that line in your mind as we get started. My strength of soul, you increased. And so theologically, we define the soul as a person's intellect, their mind, and their will, kind of the component of their person that is the decision-making, the deciding-making part of them, and as well as our emotions, all of those parts of us that make up our soul, intellect or mind, will, and emotions. So putting that back into this sentence, my strength of soul, you increased. So the psalmist is saying that God strengthened his mind, strengthened his will, his ability to make decisions, to be courageous, to have convictions, and his emotions. And I know that many in this day are very troubled by what's going on in our society. No doubt I could do one of these videos and talk about this every single day of the week. And I know believers and non-believers alike are very troubled. And I want to encourage you, if you need your soul to be strengthened, then do what this psalmist did. So now let's read the verses and then we'll walk through them. So verse 1, I give you thanks, O Lord, with my whole heart. Before the gods I sing your praise. I bow down toward your holy temple and give thanks to your name for your steadfast love and your faithfulness. For you have exalted above all things your name and your word. On the day I called, you answered me. My strength of soul you increased. So what do we see in these several verses? The first thing that we see is gratitude. The psalmist comes before God with thanksgiving. He's got a grateful heart. And notice, if you will, it was with his whole heart. So with his whole heart, he comes before God and he expresses gratitude. That's verse number 1. Verse number 2, he says that he's going to bow down before God. And so there's a couple of things in play there. First is this act of submission, to bow down to somebody, which certainly as Americans, we're not too keen on bowing down to anybody. We love our freedoms and our liberty and our individuality, all of that. But when it comes to God, that's a good thing. That's something that we should welcome with all of our hearts, that we submit to God. And notice then it's an act of worship. He's bowing down to God with this in mind. The love of God, which is called steadfast love. And one of the key kind of defining concepts of steadfast love is loyalty. So this guy that's writing this psalm recognizes the loyalty of God in his love for him and his faithfulness. So God's love and faithfulness to him causes him to bow down before God, to submit to him, and to worship him. And again, just like thanksgiving, it's with his whole heart. So gratitude first, submission that brings about worship second. Verse 3, we see reverence. He recognizes this revelation of God, that God has exalted or lifted up above all things his name and his word. God's name is sacred. It's holy. It's not common. Hallowed be thy name. Jesus taught us to pray, right? That it is God's name is an exalted name. The third commandment is to never use it in a way that would be irreverent or in vanity. And so God has exalted his name and his word. So there's this reverence that he has for the name of God and for the word of God that causes his soul to be strengthened. Now, stick with me now, right? Wholehearted gratitude, submission, and reverence. And then verse 4 is this reliance. And that flows out of the thanksgiving, submission, and reverence. That he recognizes, at least in part, who God is, and that causes him to rely upon God. He says that he calls upon God, which is a theme throughout the Bible. To call upon the name of the Lord is what is necessary for salvation. And we're told, Old and New Testament, whoever calls upon the name of the Lord will be saved. But I want you to know that that's firstly and most importantly regarding one's eternal salvation. But it's also in our day by day, everyday lives, that when we face things that we recognize are beyond us or that we don't understand or that are very difficult for us, whether in our hearts or in our minds, that we can call upon God and he will answer us. And so this is what the psalmist found, that when he called upon God, God answered him. And it wasn't likely in an audible voice like we would love maybe to have, and their God just speaks audibly, and here it is that we just hear from him. But God does this work in the secret place of the soul. And so he calls upon God, and his soul is strengthened. The strength of his soul is increased. So on this day, as we're going through all of the things that we're facing as a people, things we're facing individually, things that we're facing as a society, I want you to be encouraged. And by these verses, remember gratitude, submission, reverence, and reliance. Those are the things, when turned toward God, will bring about the strengthening of your mind, of your will, and of your emotions. I hope that's helpful for you today. God bless you.